and welcome. I'm Andy Miocha and you are watching A News. Here are the headlines. Israel and Iran continue to attack each other as leaders warn of further retaliation. G7 leaders gather in Canada. Israeli-Iranian conflict high on the agenda. The U.S. urges its citizens in Iran to leave via the Azerbaijan border. Thank you for tuning in. The Israeli-Iranian conflict entered its fourth day, with the two sides still exchanging attacks. More than 200 people have been killed in Iran since Friday, and at least 10 in Israel overnight.
The latest Israeli strikes on Tehran have killed Iran's chief intelligence officer and his deputy, in what Israel is calling a continuation of Operation Rising Lion. More than 220 people have been killed in Iran since the start of Israeli strikes on Friday. Iran has hit back with drones and ballistic missiles since then. Several people were injured in the Israeli city of Haifa, and at least 10 people have been killed in strikes overnight. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister says this is about stopping Iran's nuclear ambitions. He says intel shows Iran was on the verge of weaponizing uranium.
We can't have the world's most dangerous regime have the world's most dangerous weapons. We're protecting ourselves, but by doing so, we're protecting many others. The intel we got and we shared with the United States was absolutely clear. Was absolutely clear that they were working in a secret plan to weaponize the uranium. They were marching very quickly. They would achieve a test device and possibly an initial device within months, and certainly less than a year.
Iran says it won't negotiate under fire.
We are by no means seeking to expand the war, but naturally, as our army, our powerful IRGC, and our dear people have shown, appropriate responses have been given so far. The more they try to escalate, naturally, the responses will become tougher and more severe.
Iran's military says the Palestinian-occupied territories are no longer safe for Israelis and urged residents of Israel to leave the vicinity of vital areas for their safety.
We currently possess a complete database of all your sensitive and critical locations and vital points. Know that staying in underground shelters will not provide you with security.
Meanwhile, leaders of the G7 are meeting in Canada from Monday, with the escalating Israel-Iran conflict expected to top the agenda. With no ceasefire in sight and both countries vowing to press on, the region remains on edge.
Thousands have been left stranded in Israel after Friday's Israeli strikes on Iran that led to continued missile fire exchanges since. Flights have been cancelled and cities are under lockdown.
Tourists in Jerusalem have been caught off guard by Israel's attack on Iranian nuclear facilities since Friday. The escalation has brought life in both Jerusalem and Tel Aviv to a complete standstill. What began as brief holidays has turned into indefinite stays for thousands of foreign visitors. With Israel's airspace closed and flights cancelled until further notice, an estimated 40,000 tourists are now stranded in the country.
Very new experience for me personally, being in America. And it is scary to hear missiles being intercepted, to feel the concussive blast, even though it's up in the sky, and to have to take your son and your father and go down to a bomb shelter, which is just something you don't even have to consider in America, at least not since the 60s. So it makes me feel uneasy. I'm very anxious to get back home.
Some are now looking to neighbouring countries as alternative exit routes.
We're looking for alternative places to stay because it may be a lengthy one. And so looking for like kitchenettes, some place to kind of reduce some of our expenses. And also checking on, of course, flight schedules, perhaps out of Jordan, if possible. And because it may be a while before Israeli airports open up.
The streets of Jerusalem have been deserted. The old city is under tight restrictions, with limited access to residents and sites such as the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Western Wall largely emptied. Locals describe the city's conditions in a total deterioration ever since the Gaza conflict. But now, with Iran firing missiles into Jerusalem and directly targeting Tel Aviv, growing concerns the conflict is far from over.
I was supposed to fly back tomorrow, but now I don't know when the airport going to be reopen even. And also I want to stay until I see it's more safe, it's calm, because my kids here. So I want to see everything is good, then I go back. Maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't know.
Israel's tourism ministry has launched a round-the-clock virtual help desk to support foreign nationals. Until then, travellers remain in limbo, far from home and unsure of what comes next.
Fuel shortages, fear and frustration. That's the reality for many in Tehran, as residents queue for hours at gas stations amid continued Israeli airstrikes.
In the Iranian capital, scenes of urgency and uncertainty. Cars and motorcycles stretch around the block as residents scramble to fill up before the next Israeli strike.
People are worried, and most of the petrol stations are crowded because people are planning to get out of the city.
Some are trying to stay calm, even if they are unsure of what lies ahead.
I don't believe residential areas were hit. I'm generally relaxed. I'm not sure what's exactly happening.
But the growing queues and fuel rations are making it harder for many to move.
People are certainly worried. It's not a good situation. Petrol stations are not providing the amount we need. A car needs 40 to 50 litres of fuel, but they're only selling 20 litres, and then you have to queue up again. And most people are planning to leave the city, or they have other engagements to attend. But everyone is stuck here, as you can see.
And for those thinking of sheltering in place, options are limited.
We don't have access to a shelter. There are no shelters in the whole city. I don't think there are any places people can go to in an emergency.
As missiles continue to fly over the weekend, Tehran is bracing for what may come next, with no clear end in sight.
Global oil markets are on edge after another round of military escalation between Israel and Iran. The latest fire exchanges have pushed oil prices higher, with concerns mounting over the security of critical energy routes. Brent crude jumped 7% over the weekend and remains volatile. The cost of crude oil affects everything from how much it costs to fill up your car to the price of food at the supermarket. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said Israel has a right to defend itself against Iran, but stressed that a diplomatic solution was the best option in the long term to address Iran's nuclear program. Speaking to reporters ahead of the G7 summit in Canada, von der Leyen said she had spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the situation.
I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu today. I reiterated Europe's commitment to peace and stability in the Middle East. In this context, Israel has the right to defend itself. Iran is the principal source of regional instability, and we've always been very clear. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. We have voiced our strong concerns over Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program. A diplomatic solution remains the best way in the long run to address concerns about Iran's nuclear program. And Europe remains committed to finding a lasting solution through a negotiated deal.
G7 leaders are meeting in Canada amid rising global challenges, with the Israeli-Iranian conflict and the war in Ukraine set to be high on the agenda.
Leaders of the G7 nations are gathering in Kananaskis, Alberta on Sunday and Monday, with security concerns and economic tensions expected to top the agenda. The ongoing war in Ukraine and rising hostilities between Israel and Iran are likely to drive discussions, as both conflicts escalated in the lead-up to the summit. Israeli president has called on the group to push for the removal of nuclear weapons from Iran, speaking amid scenes of destruction at a recent missile strike site. Canadian analysts suggest that the timing of the Ukrainian and Israeli operations were likely strategic, aimed at influencing the summit's focus.
Well, one can't help but think, given the extensive planning that went into both the Ukrainian attack and the Israeli attack, I mean, these attacks take a long time to get your people into place. And so the calculation that both the Ukrainians and the Israelis would have had to have made is, what is the impact if we do this before, after, or during the G7? And so obviously they're making some form of calculation, and the calculation is either they're thinking this gets them on the agenda and they want to be discussed amongst the G7 nations, or they don't care. Time to get your
economic concerns, particularly US tariff policies, are also expected to surface.
I think that it'll be sort of like, okay, you know, how do we deal with the economic challenges without necessarily saying that the whole problem is the American tariffs? I mean, that is going to be the elephant in the room as we move forward.
Organisers are expected to skip the traditional joint communiqué to avoid a repeat of the 2018 summit, when Trump retracted his support after leaving.
We now go to Canada's Kananaskis and Mitch McCann, who has the latest surrounding the G7 summit.
World leaders are arriving here in Kananaskis, Canada, at a time of great volatility in many parts of the world. In the coming days, at the top of the agenda now for discussions is likely to be the ongoing escalation and violence between Iran and Israel that we've seen in recent days. Now, most G7 countries have already put out statements calling for the violence to be de-escalated. However, we understand now, according to reports, that all G7 countries are likely to come out together and put out a joint communique or a statement about this, calling for a de-escalation intention. So expect that to be at the top of the list of discussions. Also, there are a number of other items on the schedule for the coming days that have been set by the leader of the host country, Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada. Among them, a coordinated response to wildfires. That's a very important issue to Canada and, of course, the United States. Canada currently dealing with wildfires in the Saskatchewan province, but also the United States has been dealing with serious fires in recent months and years. Of course, we don't have to look far back to remember the devastating fires in Los Angeles, but also in Hawaii before that. So that'll be one point on the agenda. Another is energy security and also discussions on the advancements of artificial intelligence. But it's fair to say that conflicts around the world are probably going to dominate discussions here in the Kananaskis region of Canada. There's obviously the ongoing war in Gaza that will be talked about among the leaders, but also the war in Ukraine. Now, Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, has personally invited President Volodymyr Zelensky here, and he'll be here in the coming days to talk about strategies and ending that war. Now, that is an interesting discussion involving the United States, because in recent weeks it has seemed as if, based on Donald Trump's comments, that he is growing tired of this process taking too long, a slow process to end that war. He's also expressed frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin, suggesting he might not be wanting to find peace in the end. So those are issues that will be talked about, but obviously trade and the economy will be another one. It will be potentially awkward for Donald Trump to sit around the table with other world leaders he's put large tariffs on in recent months. It will be interesting having Donald Trump here. Many leaders will be working out and strategizing how to interact with the US president, not wanting to antagonize him. We don't have to look too far back in 2018 when Donald Trump left here early and then criticized the then Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. So world leaders will be approaching Donald Trump with caution, but it's very likely that many will want to meet him and have bilateral discussions as they try and reduce their own trade burdens as those negotiations continue. So plenty of topics for discussion here in the Kananaskis region, but of course conflicts around the world are likely to take precedent. Mitch McCann, 4A News, in the Kananaskis region of Canada.
Russian and Turkish presidents Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan condemned Israel's attack on Iran, calling it a violation of the UN Charter and international law. The two held a phone call voicing deep concern over the growing Israeli-Iranian conflict, warning of long-term regional consequences, and urged an immediate ceasefire through diplomatic means. Joining us to talk on the latest as the Iranian-Israeli conflict entered its fourth day is political analyst Castra Silva, coming to us from Sao Paulo. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Donald Trump has reportedly rejected an Israeli plan to assassinate Iran's supreme leader. In a social media post, he confidently wrote, "We will have peace soon." How much damage control would you say Washington is engaged in right now to try and prevent this thing escalating any further?
So we have to see that, in my view, there is no policy process in Washington. In Washington, you have a situation where it's not clear who is running the policy, how much information is shared through the government. So I'm of the view that parts of the government, of the US government, had the notion there was an attack, isn't certain how much Trump knew himself. So in a way, the US policy is a passenger in this conflict, and it's very uncertain. Whatever comes out of Washington at this stage is damage control, is targeted leaks to show that they knew what they knew about everything. Did they not know about everything? Did they play a role in eluding Iran? That there were conversations, so that might explain why Iran the leaders were targeted in such an impressive fashion. So there are a lot of questions, and I'm not sure we have the answers for those.
What do you expect from the G7 summit in Canada, as it was originally meant to be focused on the war in Ukraine and the global trade tensions? Do you see a joint statement happening on Iranian-Israeli conflict, given different points of view among the 7 biggest economies?
I think on the Iran question, having some kind of a statement, it's possible, because people, despite the surprise with Israel attack and the breadth of it, there is a general consensus that Iran should not have nuclear weapons. So I think it's pretty feasible a joint statement on those lines. I'm not very sure if there is a consensus to what is the policy implications of such a statement. That for me is far harder. I don't see the conflict entering a de-escalation phase. On the contrary, I see the conflict still escalating. And the wild card is if the US is dragged in, for example, if Iran blocks the Hormuz Straits or does asymmetric terrorist attacks outside of the region.
Well, on that, the escalation phase, Ankara said it's ready to facilitate a return to nuclear negotiations and an end of the Iranian-Israeli conflict. Tehran has already said to Doha and Muscat it is not open to negotiations on a ceasefire while under Israeli attack. Would you expect Israel to cease their strikes until it fulfills its objectives? We've heard Tel Aviv already declaring air superiority over Tehran.
Well, you touched the basic problem there, is what are Israeli objectives? Are there just to stop nuclear program? Is the objective regime change in Iran? I'm not sure what is the objective here. Furthermore, I think Israel has been for a long time consumed by the tactical outcomes disregarding the long-term strategic implications. So whatever the regime that comes out of this, if it is the continuation of the Ayatollah regime, or even if the regime falls, I find it very hard that whatever regime is in Iran does not have nuclear weapons. because what is happening in the world order is that countries are increasingly viewing nuclear weapons as the sole means not to be attacked. That is the case.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
How much of an effect would you say that Ankara and Moscow's call for a ceasefire might have here? We've heard Putin and Erdogan condemning Israeli strikes as a violation of the UN Charter.
I'm not sure they are effective because now the regime in Iran is on a survival mode. I find it much more plausible an escalation of the conflict in an asymmetric way than a de-escalation or taking peace initiatives coming from which side it might come in order to reach negotiations. I think we are still on a spiral of escalation. I think, like I said, it's very uncertain what are the objectives of Israel in the end. So I don't see really room in the short term to de-escalation.
Well, Diogo, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight.
Thank you. Thank you.
In other news, the manhunt for the gunman who killed a prominent Minnesota lawmaker and her husband and wounded another 2 people has come to an end. The suspect, Vance Bolter, was taken into custody on Sunday evening after a 2-day statewide search.
After a 2-day manhunt across Minnesota, police arrested Vance Bolter, a 57-year-old man accused of posing as a police officer before carrying out 2 politically targeted shootings. Former Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were killed in their Brooklyn Park home early Saturday morning. Hours earlier, Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were attacked at their home in Champlin, 9 miles away. The Hoffmans survived. In a message shared by Senator Amy Klobuchar, Yvette Hoffman wrote that her husband took 9 bullets and she took 8. Authorities say Bolter altered a vehicle to resemble a police cruiser. Inside, a manifesto, a target list, and a tan cowboy hat believed to be his. A reward of $50,000 had been offered for his capture. Local authorities praised the efforts of its officers, stating that there were more than 100 policemen involved in the search and they received more than 400 public tip-offs.
Still in the United States, tensions flared in downtown Los Angeles at the weekend as police used tear gas and mounted units to disperse crowds during the second week of protests. Protests intensified following a military parade on Saturday, marking 250 years of the U.S. Armed Forces, coinciding with U.S. President Donald Trump's birthday. The protests followed a week of tension in the city, where demonstrations over federal immigration raids resulted in Trump calling in National Guard troops and U.S. Marines to help keep the peace against the wishes of state officials. In global economy news, China's economy showed strain last month as factory output slowed to a 6-month low and property investment fell sharply, according to a new report. While retail sales improved, the country continues to face challenges.
China's economy is showing signs of strain, with official data revealing a slowdown in industrial output and deeper troubles in the property sector. That's according to the latest report from China's National Bureau of Statistics on Monday, which shows mixed economic data. The country's factory output growth hit a 6th-month low in May, while retail sales picked up steam, offering temporary relief for the world's second-largest economy.
In May, the value-added industrial output of large-scale enterprises nationwide increased by 5.8% year-on-year and 0.61% month-on-month.
However, it was the slowest growth since November last year. Within the property sector, investments plunged more than 10% and home sales shrank.
Real estate development investment declined by 10.7%. The total floor area of newly built commercial housing sold nationwide was 353.15 million square meters, a year-on-year decrease of 2.9%.
There's also growing pressure from abroad. US President Donald Trump said last week that a trade deal that restored a fragile truce in the US-China trade war was done, with Trump confirming a steep 55% tariff on Chinese exports.
In the next stage, there are still many external instabilities and uncertainties, which will place some pressure on China's foreign trade growth. However, China still has clear comprehensive advantages in foreign trade development, and the continued expansion of high-level opening up will support the steady development of foreign trade.
Beijing last month rolled out a package of stimulus measures, including interest rate cuts and a major liquidity injection aimed at shielding the economy from the hit from US tax hikes. However, analysts continue to flag challenges for China in hitting its growth target of roughly 5% this year, and warns an imminent stimulus was unlikely.
Several countries have appealed to Azerbaijan for assistance in evacuating their citizens from Iran, requesting permission for transit through Azerbaijani territory en route to their home countries. The evacuation process is ongoing. Members of Russia's Grand Symphony Orchestra expressed gratitude after arriving to Azerbaijan from Iran. They announced a special concert at the Baku Philharmonic dedicated to their experience.
Yes, my name is Pyotr Surekin. I'm a cellist in the Grand Symphony Orchestra, and I'm truly touched by the attention shown to an ordinary musician. On behalf of the orchestra, I want to thank everyone, especially the Azerbaijani side, for the great honor and support they gave us by welcoming our orchestra in this difficult situation. We are frequent guests in Baku, and I hope we'll be visiting even more often.
Добрый вечер, меня зовут Денис Калинский, я играю на виолончели в большом...
Good evening, my name is Denny Kalinsky. I play the cello in the Grand Symphony Orchestra of the BSOVR. The evacuation went, if I can put it this way, according to plan. We didn't face any major difficulties. Everything was very well organized. The team worked in a coordinated way. Everyone maintained a mobilized attitude, you could say. Overall, everything went smoothly. All the services operated efficiently. Everything was great. We'd like to express our gratitude to everyone, in particular to the Azerbaijani side for receiving us, as well as the Russian services, the Ministry of Culture and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Everyone did their part and helped us. A sincere thank you to all of them.
Российские, Министерство культуры и МИД России, в общем, все сработало, все помогли, и большое им спасибо человеческое.
Подготовился к интервью, я просто я просто...
I want to thank the Republic of Azerbaijan for giving us the opportunity to evacuate so quickly and smoothly. What's more, we've made the decision to perform a concert tomorrow at the Baku Philharmonic with the group that stayed behind and didn't fly out. It may be an unusual concert, but I believe it will be genuine and heartfelt, because these are the people who experienced those 3 intense days. And yet, we've made it to Azerbaijan.
Ten Tajikistan citizens have also been successfully evacuated from Iran, crossing into Azerbaijan via the Astara state border checkpoint.
A conflict erupted between Iran and Israel, closing the airspace and forcing our evacuation from wherever possible. Thanks to your state's assistance, we were invited and granted permission to cross the border. Our passage was smooth and calm.
We planned to stay for 10 days, but it turned out we stayed there for a week. And thanks to your guys, we're able to get home. Our citizens can't seem to do that. Thank you very much once again.
The United States warned its citizens in Iran to leave immediately, recommending the border with Azerbaijan as the safest route out.
In a new advisory, the United States Virtual Embassy in Iran has issued a pressing call for American citizens currently in Iran to depart the country immediately and, where possible, to do so through neighboring Azerbaijan. The advisory issued over the weekend comes amid escalating regional tensions. With limited diplomatic presence inside Iran, the US is relying on its virtual platform to communicate urgent travel guidance. The message specifically recommends the use of Azerbaijan's land border crossings, notably the Astara checkpoint, citing it as one of the safest and most cooperative routes for departure.
Appreciate you doing this for us. As I said, the border is not usually open, so you've been an exception, and we very much appreciate it. There is very few options at this point, so yeah, it's a tough situation over there. Yeah.
The Azerbaijani government has already facilitated safe passage for several foreign nationals, including Russian citizens and diplomatic staff from the Kyrgyz Republic.
At least 41 Azerbaijani citizens have so far been evacuated from Iran. That's according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which says the Azerbaijani embassy in Iran and the chief consulate in Tabriz are reviewing applications from citizens and taking necessary measures. They said that Azerbaijan's diplomatic missions in Iran will continue to operate. Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Kazakhstan for a 3-day state visit to attend the second China-Central Asia Summit. The visit comes at the invitation of Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. Leaders from Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are also expected to attend the summit aimed at deepening regional cooperation. As Astana is gearing up for the meeting of leaders at the second China-Central Asia Summit, the accompanying cooperation and investment forum is in full swing. Joining us from Astana to talk on the summit is economist Rahimbek Abderrahmanov. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we've already seen one trilateral document signed on expanding the Aktau port at the forum, aiming to boost the middle corridor. What else do you believe we can expect to see from not only the forum but the summit as well? Do you anticipate maybe some political messages to push forward the cooperation of Beijing and the Central Asian Five?
Yeah, thanks for having me. This trilateral document on expanding the Aktau port is a really significant development, particularly in the context of strengthening the middle corridor, the Trans-Caspian route. From both the forum and the summit, we can expect to see further announcement related to infrastructure connectivity, most likely, trade facilitation, and maybe digital integration. These gatherings are also an opportunity to present financial commitments of multilateral mechanisms to support regional transport and logistics networks. Your second question, political messaging, it's highly likely. China has consistently emphasized its strategic partnership with the Central Asian states, particularly within the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. This summit could produce language reaffirming mutual sovereignty, then non-interference and multipolarity, all messages that serve to strengthen Beijing's cooperative stance and counterbalance Western influence in the region.
Well, a lot of things are happening in the background right now. Of course, the Iranian-Israeli conflict, as well as the U.S. Tariff back and forths. Do you expect any of these to be addressed in some sort of a final statement of the summit?
While regional forums like this are primarily focused on cooperation, I don't expect this. Well, maybe I would not be surprising if broader geopolitical issues such as Iranian-Israel conflict or growing economic tensions between the US and China are indirectly referenced or touched. These developments affect global supply chains for sure, energy security and financial stability, which are relevant to all parties involved in this summit. However, in an official statement, such issues may be addressed cautiously, if at all. So the language is likely to emphasize the importance of global stability, dialogue, and peaceful resolution of the conflicts without naming specific countries, I guess. So the goal would be to maintain diplomatic balance and avoiding alienating any major partners or investors.
Rahimbek, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your insights.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you.
Elsewhere, Georgia introduced a new residence permit for IT specialists. According to the law that comes into effect in September, the permit will be valid for 3 years, but will be revoked if the holder spends less than 183 days in Georgia within any 12-month period. Eligible applicants include foreign IT professionals registered as labor migrants, small business owners, or representatives and managers of international IT companies. Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you so much for watching, but don't go anywhere. In a couple of minutes in our context, we'll be talking all things Middle Corridor.